morning, Chelsea. We're talking to Layla about the legal aspect of nursing. We had tons of interest in this, so it's super exciting. I'm so glad that Layla gave us her time tonight. If you guys have questions, make sure you're asking them, put them in the comments, and Layla will be happy to answer them. So good evening, Layla.
Hi everybody. I'm excited to be here and share some of my legal knowledge and found nursing knowledge as well. And hopefully we'll be able to answer questions and talk about some of the issues that some of us nurses never get a chance to actually, really get to discuss with our peers or with other people because it's usually a taboo thing. So I'm glad to be here.
Yes, I'm super excited. So, Layla, would you just give us a little bit of background about yourself, introduce yourself, and let us know what brought you here today?
Sure. Okay. So my name is Layla Doherty. I'm still practicing law. I'm a lawyer. I've been a lawyer now for about 19, 20 years. I have done lots of corporate work. My very first 3 years, I was in the malpractice realm. I did plaintiff's work and got to be really involved in very interesting cases. And then I kind of progressed through my career and just did a lot of different things. I didn't really do any family law or criminal law, but lots of administrative, lots of regulatory work. So, I did that for a long time. And then my dad got sick a couple years ago. He was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. And in the process of walking through that disease with him, we were told at the time of his diagnosis, it had metastasized to his lung. Well, actually, primary was in his lung, and then it metastasized to his spine, his ribs, his right femur, both arms, and we didn't know how long he had to live. So I dove in with my legal knowledge into the world of medicine and looked at different trials, talked to people at the National Institute of Health. And anyway, I was able to navigate for him and alongside my dad's oncologist. We were told we didn't know if he was going to live 3 weeks or 3 months because there was so much bone metastasis. And he ended up being one of the very first patients in our state to get the immunotherapy. And my dad, I am happy to say, as of March 15th, is either 3 or 4 years now with no evidence of disease. He's a miracle. And through my dad's oncologist, he encouraged me to keep on with my my thirst for medical knowledge. And so I decided to hang up my lawyer hat for a little bit and go to nursing school. I did an accelerated program and just recently graduated October of last year. And now I'm employed as an intensive care nurse and still trying to get my bearings. So kudos to all those critical care nurses out there, because it's a very fascinating and rewarding area, but it is very challenging. And I've learned lots from fantastic priests. I've got an incredible hospital and staff that have really helped with my education and continue on. So my desire is to be able to merge the two careers and to help nurses and patients to better our healthcare system. And so where we are now is just since I've been a nurse, I've had lots of inquiries about depositions and court dates and all that sort of thing. So we were able to hook up together, and I've done lots of depositions and lots of different trials. So I thought, okay, well, I can absolutely offer something to our group and see if we can, any questions that you guys may have. So if you don't mind, I'll just start right in with, let's talk just about what a deposition is, because really, I think the way that this whole topic came up was, how to avoid a deposition. And as much as I hate to say this, you're not going to avoid a deposition. People that are in a legal situation, all of us are witnesses to things that happen in everyday life. So whether you're say at a stoplight, you witness a car accident, or you witness a robbery, you have touched a patient, you have been the person's nurse, you are a witness to that particular event. So just by the fact that you are present and you have knowledge about a certain situation, that makes you eligible to be a witness. So the way the court system works is they have to depose somebody during the course of a case. So if I find I've got to be able to prove that case or disprove that case by calling witnesses to find out what did people see, what did people hear, what was their experience. So the bad news of this, guys, is that we can't avoid deposition. That's just not going to happen because by virtue of this is our job, this is our career, this is what we've chosen to do. And the fact that maybe we've witnessed something and we weren't the nurse, but we saw something happen in a hospital or a clinical situation that a party needs more about that situation. So where we are now is what do we do? Get a subpoena to be deposed, which a subpoena is a legal document that says you by law are required to show up to a certain place and time and give your testimony. It's not a trial. You're not in a courtroom. You're actually, most are done in an office. They're done in a place that everybody decides on, but it's not going to, usually going to be in front of a judge. So when you go to the deposition, what they're going to be asking us about is probably the care or what we saw or how we provided care to our patient. And it might not necessarily that it's because we were negligent or that something that we gave a wrong medication or that we didn't do a turn every 2 hours, but something is happening where they need our perspective as to what happened with a particular patient. So our job is to be truthful and to tell, to report, to tell the parties under oath what it is that we experienced and what we saw. So, which then leads us down to the next base, which is, well, but so many of us see so many different patients. So how do we remember, unless it's some profound case that has touched all of us, how do we remember patient to patient? And as my preceptors have taught me, you do that through your documentation. And I know I'm sick and tired of hearing that. So in a deposition, your documentation can be your best friend or your worst enemy. So make sure that whenever you're doing your charting and your documentation, that you're following your hospital policies, the protocols that are laid forth by your supervisors, your preceptors, your mentors, the charge nurses, the physicians. Try to do that to the best of your ability. And if you find yourself in a situation where you can't follow that protocol or that particular policy or that standard, then make sure you document why you're not doing that, such as I can't turn my patient because of the patient's condition. See vitals or see end of shift notes, or you just want to be able to, or family. I've had cases where the family has requested that I not turn the patient or that I not give a particular drug, or the patients refused a drug or refused to have protective dressings or a bath or whatever. Or they don't want their wounds they don't want to have them redressed. So, documenting why you're not doing something is just as important as documenting what you're doing. So keep that in mind. The other thing that I have learned in my short time as a nurse is that one of my precepts said, develop your own practice to where when you're caring for your patients, you know what you're doing. So when I have multiple patients, I have made a pattern for myself where at a certain time, all of my patients, I'm turning them on their right side. And then the next turn, everybody's going on the left side. So that way I'm not confusing myself as to who's on the right side, who's on the left side, who has protective dressing, when did I give them the bath. I try to do things consistently. So 5 years from now, if I get deposed and they want to know how often I turn my patient because the patient has a bed sore, then I can say, hey, well, this is how I do it. I know that I put them on the right side and their left side and then the center because I have my own practice of every 2 hours. This is how I do this to make sure I don't ever miss it. By developing things like that in your own practice that are specifically unique to yourself, you can, without a doubt, in a deposition, be able to say to somebody, I am 100% sure that I did that. I documented it that way, and I know I did it because this is how I practice with almost every one of my patients, unless they've told me not to do it or the family members told me not to do it. So that's a really good way to help you answer questions in a deposition, is know your own practice and be consistent, because that will help you answer some of the difficult questions that an attorney may ask you in a deposition. So you're going to ask yourself, what kinds of things are you going to be asked in a deposition?
Mm-hmm.
Again, as a nurse, you got to know that you're going to be asked nursing questions, such as why did you give? Why didn't you give? You know, they're going to ask you about your standard of care. And again, that goes back to consistency and really documentation. When our managers tell us to document our charts, make sure that we're concise and clear, they're not doing it because they hate us. They're doing it because many of our managers have had to participate in legal issues, and they know that, as they say, if you didn't chart it, it didn't happen.
Yeah.
So that is very, very true, because otherwise you can see what would happen is if you didn't chart something, even though in your mind maybe it was that special patient that you knew that you did something, that attorney is going to say, how many patients have you seen since then? 500? How do you know that that is the one that you remove the art line from? So it's really, really important, not just from an administrative part, but because I truly, truly care about the nursing. I believe that the people that are in nursing are some of the most fantastic, big-hearted people, sincere people that I've ever met in my life. And I have now learned, the demands that are on us. And sometimes we're all doing the best that we can do, but don't ever take for granted the importance of documentation. And I will also say on that be careful copying and pasting, because my preceptors have taught me that the most important assessment that we do is our first assessment, because that's what we see. And that's important because if we're called to a deposition, we're not going to be able to answer for the person that is that had the patient before us. We can only answer for what we see and what we do. So make sure when you're part of your as part of your coverage and due diligence and all the good things that we want good nurses to do, that you are really doing a thorough assessment, especially on your initial assessment, charting your own, because that's gonna really hurt you in a deposition. And ultimately, the bad news is that if for some reason it is believed that you are the one that's negligent, caused the patient harm in conjunction with the hospital or your provider, you will be called to trial. And trial is a very intensive, scary, sometimes self-esteem damaging uh, uh, incident or time, because the lawyer's job on the other side is to find negligence with what you've done so somebody will pay out.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very, very important when we're talking about the charting and we're talking about things about being consistent, that the copying and pasting, I believe that there are algorithms as well where that people in Epic or what you're using, they can tell when things are copied and pasted.
Yeah.
So that's important because that potentially is discoverable. And what you don't want to do as a new nurse or as an old nurse or a medium nurse is you don't want to find yourself in a situation where you have copied and pasted wrong information from the previous shift and you've continued that on through a 12-hour shift, when what has happened is that the patient has suffered some harm, and had an assessment been performed, you could have prevented that harm from happening. So Don't underestimate the power of Epic, because I believe there is a way to determine when stuff has been copied and pasted.
Mhm.
Certainly, if you have copied and pasted your own work and you are making alterations, but based upon what it is that the hospital's policy is, starting every 2 hours, every 4 hours, um, you can copy and paste your own work and make alterations based on your observances after you've copied and pasted. So I don't see anything necessarily wrong with that. But be careful about copying and pasting others' work, and be careful about not performing your assessments, because that will come out in a deposition. That's the kind of things that lawyers will look for to prove negligence. So, when you're going into a deposition, you're going to be able to review. Usually, they're going to provide you information based on the case that you're going to be asked questions about.
Mhm.
Um, you are absolutely entitled to have time to review any documents. Do not be afraid, if you are caught in a deposition, to say, I need some time to review these records. I have seen these records, and if I've seen them, I've not, it's been a long time. So I would like to stop the deposition, and I'd like an opportunity to review these documents. Make sure that you are advocating for yourself whenever, if you're called into a deposition, because I think that there's a misconception that if you get called into a deposition, that you're not going to be able to stop, not going to be able to take a breath or to ask for leeway on your own part. But that's just not true. You
Okay.
pick up and say, I need some time to review the documents. So can I take a break?
Can you ask for more documents than your own personal charting? Like, could you ask for provider's notes, or what do they give you? Just your own documents?
It's going to depend on the case, because sometimes, they might not want to provide all of the documents because they might want to show there's an income. But there's
Okay.
never, ever any harm in asking. It's like the cardinal rule of nursing, right? Like, better to ask than to not ask. So
Yeah.
if you make sure that if you feel like you need more information to answer the question, then absolutely speak up and say, hey, before this question, I need to take a look at the diagnosis, or I need to take a look at the doctor's notes. Why did I order that x-ray? Well, I don't know. Did he have a swan placed? Did he have an NG tube placed? I don't know why I asked for, if the note just says I ask for verification of placement, I need to see maybe the last 12 hours notes to see what am I asking for verification of.
Okay.
So that would be completely reasonable to say, I need to see that. Or another example I can say, hey, why did you replace this person's potassium? Well, I need to look at the labs for the last 6 hours. So if I can look at the labs, I can tell you why, I need to see that. And I also need to see whatever doctor's notes were there in the last 6 hours. Because maybe a doctor's asked you to replace potassium, but it wasn't reflected on the labs, but they have a clinical reason that they need to have that put in, maybe because of there was much Lasix, offered, and they know that they're going to have a low potassium. But, certainly it's better to ask for additional information than to not ask at all. So
So,
definitely,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Someone asked a few weeks ago in the group, and I don't think you chimed in, you may have, so this may ring a bell. Someone asked, if I'm in a deposition, will the hospital provide me support? So what's the answer to that? Is there going to be someone with the hospital that's there with you, supporting you, loving on you?
So, that's a really fantastic question. Um, I'd like to think that generally the hospitals that we work for will stand by us, even if we've made a mistake. I mean, God forbid. Um, you know, in my experience, like I said, my managers, my hospital, I work for a fantastic hospital and have had amazing support during this learning time. But I'd like to say that without a doubt, yes, every hospital is going to stand next to us, and they're going to provide the coverage, and they're going to provide the people to help represent us. However, if you don't take away anything from this talk today, take away this, please, that we are all responsible for our own licenses. So I would encourage everybody, every nurse, no matter what area you work in, to at least explore the option of getting your own malpractice insurance. And that is because if you find yourself in a horrible situation where you need the hospital attorneys or the hospital itself as the entity to
Mhm.
represent the physician, the anesthesiologist, 4 nurses, the transport person, like if you have 15 people here that are being questioned for the treatment of a patient, you know, for me personally, it's my own preference. I appreciate the hospital support, but I would like to have an attorney, or I'd like to have an attorney who is looking out for just my best interest and my license. So I I think that I don't think it's a safe thing to say that, hey, if I make a mistake or if I find myself in a situation that I have to be deposed, that the hospital is going to be able to protect everybody all the time. That's
Mhm.
just not realistic. I mean, even if the hospital's got the best intentions, it's not realistic. And certainly for those of us that work in higher risk areas, um, you have to remember that sometimes you're not just worried about the patient bringing a cause of action, but sometimes you can get outside complaints. Anybody can file a complaint with the Board of Nursing. So if you find yourself in a situation where somebody has filed a complaint with the Board of Nursing and you need representation with that, it's unlikely the hospital is going to expend resources to
Mhm.
save you individually on some individual's family coming in and filing a complaint against you. That's going to be on your dime and your time. So,
Interesting. So I have a question about that. First, I'm going to tell you that the top of your head is cut off.
oh,
So
sorry.
no, it's fine. I'm just letting you know because if you watch this later and you're like, why didn't you tell me? All right.
Right.
Anyways, yes, the top of your head was cut off, and now your chin is cut off.
Oh, okay, there. How's that?
There you go.
Okay.
Okay. Now, I didn't know that someone could file a complaint against you as the nurse with the Board of Nursing. I've been a nurse for 14 years.
Yeah, well, I have heard of, even other crazy complaints. You've got to think that if the Board of Nursing receives a complaint by somebody that thinks that you are not doing something appropriately, the
Okay.
Board of Nursing is going to, they're going to investigate that. So in the event that you have a situation where, you know, let me rephrase it this way. If you have a situation where somebody comes in and files a complaint against you with the Board of Nursing that is not a larger matter that's being handled within the hospital, that's going to be on your dime.
Yeah.
So, what I always say is that you want your own coach, you want your own person fighting for you, and that person will be an advocate for you with the Board of Nursing as well. They
Okay.
can be a mediator and get into the heart. What is it that the Board of Nursing is concerned about? What is it that needs to be rectified or addressed? And or file something on your behalf saying that this is just a bunch of bull. So
Okay.
if anything at all, I think it's good practice to carry that malpractice insurance. So if you don't ever need it, then thank God. It's like car insurance. Thank God nobody's gotten into a car accident.
Right.
But if you're like I am and live in the Midwest where we just had a massive hailstorm and, you know, I pay all these premiums and I never have to file a claim. Well, what if I do now? It's going to save me a lot of money and a lot of grief because I know it's going to take care of. So, and just for our viewers, so they know, um, I was curious because I don't have a malpractice policy yet, but I am in the process of getting one. I contacted my nursing professor to see, what companies she's gone through, and I looked at the company she has her policy through, and it is like less than $50 a year for me, and that amount I believe was $1 million per 6 million total. I think per incident. I'd have to go back and look at it, but point being is that it's very reasonable, and
Yeah.
for that amount of money to be able to have a peace of mind that, God forbid, if something were to happen, you would have some coverage. Great. And then if the hospital comes to you, fantastic. But if a situation comes up where you need somebody to come in and advocate for you while the hospital attorneys are doing their work, then you know somebody on your team that is watching out for your best interest, not necessarily the best interest of the whole. So I think that's a really important, at least an important point for our friends out there to at least explore it. You don't have to get it, but certainly do yourself a favor and just take the time to get it priced out and see whether or not area of practice it's worth worth it to you to have maybe that extra peace of mind. And if you never ever get to use it, fantastic. And look, check with your accountants. I believe it's also tax deductible because it's part of your nursing costs. And I just think I would never not advise somebody to not have it. So
Right.
I think it's an important, but as far as all this legal litigation goes, I don't want our friends out there to be nervous about it because it's going to happen. It's just the nature of the beast. We're taking care of people sick and things happen and we are all human.
Mm-hmm.
Just know that God forbid if something does happen, that you have rights to. You can slow it down, know how you practice, chart make sure your documentation is good. Don't do any shortcuts. Know how like I said, you practice, do your charting. And the other really big thing that I think people are pretty, deficient in is your bedside report, your end of shift report. Do something more than just a blurb. If you've had a patient that's been stable all night long, then state that. Say, report given to Chelsea. Patient was stable throughout the night, had no complaints, was on nasal cannula for 2 liters. Family was at bedside throughout the night. Possible transfer orders in the morning, and then I follow it up with bedside report and introduction given, handoff complete. So that way, you have reported to Chelsea that there was no major issues. This person was stable. They had 2 liters of oxygen nasal cannula, and you took her in there. You introduced her to the patient, and she's looked at it. It's done. And then on the flip side, if you have a patient that's not stable, at least put the big blurbs in there. Patient was not stable, hemodynamically stable, required 2 units of blood, cardiovascular surgeon to follow up. Put in, you don't have to be super detailed, but at least point out the big things. So that way that the attorney knows that at shift change, that Chelsea knew that he's bleeding somewhere and we had to give him 2 units and that we're monitoring him for that. And that Chelsea, hey, we've units of blood that's gone in, keep monitoring his H&H and make sure that we don't have any more significant changes. That kind of stuff will help you every single time, because if you don't remember your patient, you're going to say, if that's what I wrote, my bed, in my shift change, that's what happened, because that's what I do as a matter of practice. And that will go a long way with any type of deposition.
That's great advice. Viewers, you guys have questions? Sometimes it's just too much to take in and we don't really have any immediate questions. If you have questions, ask. Layla's great and we'll answer them. And if you guys have questions that are watching on replay, just get your questions in. And if Layla doesn't see it come through, I'll make sure that I tag her in it so that she can come back and answer as you guys watch on replay. We've already been talking for 30 minutes. I didn't realize that. Oh my goodness.
It's great. It's such rich information that I just feel like people aren't talking about this kind of stuff. And it's, like I said, a taboo topic,
Right.
but I think if we talk about it more and we can empower each other more on how to be better nurses and better offensive players,
Wow.
and making sure that we're doing what's best for our patient, and that helps us in the long run and helps the hospitals in the long run and our providers in the long run. I think it'll be, if it happens, then it won't be such a scary thing. So if anybody has any questions about anything like this, please send Chelsea an email or text or a message, and then I'll make sure that if I don't know the answer, I will find the answer to it and try to get back with you. I really would like. I love being a resource for all of our fellow nurses. You know, we've got to power through it and keep learning together, right?
Absolutely. I really appreciate your time tonight. Yeah, one of my preceptors a while back told me chart like your chart is always going to court. And so that was something that I always just, okay, wait, let me rephrase that. This is going to court, just, and I was a traveler at the time when we got a real quick, you just get a 3-day orientation when you're traveling. And so it was someone that was orienting me and she was like, you need to chart like this is going to court. And I thought, I had been a nurse for 3.5 years when I started traveling. And I was like, that is great advice.
It is. It is. They say that, you should write like everything that you're going forth is going to be in a deposition, be read out loud in a deposition. And that is very, very true. So, but again, don't be afraid if it happens. There's lots of people that have been through it. And I just think, as another one of my preceptors said, he told me, he said, work smart, harder.
Yeah.
That's super, super true when it comes to this kind of stuff. So be smart in your interactions, be smart in the way you work, know yourself. And everybody take a look to see what that malpractice insurance cost, because if you ever get it, it will come in handy and you won't be sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Layla. Thank you for your time and try a fabulous night. All right. See you later.
All right. Bye. Everybody have a good evening. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.